Welcome to Body Hack and Build a Better You, the podcast where we unlock the secret to living a longer, healthier life and create a bloom zone in our life and within our family. I'm your host, Michaela Morell, and I'm here to provide you with the tools and knowledge to empower you to build a better you, one essential building block at a time. Did you know that most baby food contains lead? The food industry takes zero responsibilities for exposing our children to harmful toxins, and as parents, we are left to figure it out on our own. In today's episode, I'll dive into the shocking truth about toxic metals in baby food, and most importantly, what we can do to protect our kids. As a mom of 3, I also share my experiences with Baby-Led Weaning, the BLW, a game changer for making mealtime easier, less stressful, and more enjoyable for the whole family. Let's take back control of our children's nutrition. I want to remind you that this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Read the disclaimer in the show notes, and I want to remind you to always consult your healthcare provider if you plan to make any dietary changes. So happy for you to join me here today as we're going to talk about baby food and actually toxins in baby food too, because I hope to inspire you guys to take a little bit more control over the food we're putting into our babies, because the brain development stage is so important for babies, and we want to limit and try to keep the amount of toxins in our baby to the bare minimum as to our best ability. And one thing we can target when we do that is the food intake our babies are having, if we want to create the superhumans we want them to become, and set them up for a life that is hopefully a prosperous and healthy life. So we have to talk about the dangers of giving them commercial foods at early stages in life. And I also going to talk a lot about baby-led weaning. It's another way to look at food and how we should feed our babies. And I did not know about baby-led weaning with my first child. I learned about it when he was a little bit older, and as soon as I was reading about it, it made so much sense to me, and I got a little bit sad I did not know about this earlier, because I would have implemented it with him too. And I'm going to go a little bit deeper into the journey with my 3 different kids, and I implemented with my second and with my third child, and what differences I saw in the relationship my kids have to food. And as many parents, we're purchasing baby food on the baby shelf stores because that's what we have been taught that we should do. They should have their food. Like we are like, that's human food, that is dog food, that is baby food. And we're categorizing it into who we are and what we can eat. But did you know that nearly all baby food on store shelves contains heavy metals that can impact the brain development? And today, that's what we're going to talk about. So let's talk about traditional feeding versus BLW. So when we're looking at traditional feeding, we are taught that when the baby is a baby, around 4 months of age, sometimes they're recommending around 6 months, but I think they've been pushing it down to 4 months. We should start with porridge, and we should make the porridge that are like store-bought, and it's called baby porridge. And we usually make that, and we're so excited. I remember that day myself too, when my son, my firstborn son that I've been longing so long to have. And my firstborn, for you who don't know me, I have always been crazy about babies. I actually wanted to have my own baby when I was like already 6 years of age. I planned to kidnap my little brother and go and live with him out in the forest. I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. I saw more value in being a mother than going to school. And when I was 16, I started researching how to adopt a baby. And when I was 18 and I hadn't found Mr. Right, I was devastated. And when I was 19 and then 20, and I felt like I was getting too old to have children, basically, because I wanted to be a very young mom. I was very mature. I was never like, it's so funny. I've been talking with different people lately that I just met going back home, and they're like, Michaela, you were never a child. You were always an adult. You always took adult responsibilities at home. And we were many people that saw that and did not maybe think that it was okay for a 10-year-old to run a whole household, but that's the kind of person I was. I took charge. I saw a problem and I fixed a problem. And in my family, I had four brothers that I saw was the problem that I needed to train and help. So I basically raised them. And I also felt very guilty for my mom needing to do all the chores and cook and so on. So often I just took over all the responsibility of like cooking, cleaning, and so on, and let her have a break after raising, because we are not only five kids, we are eight kids. So she had already been a mother for a very long time. I am the third youngest kid, but even if I'm almost the youngest, I was probably the one with the most responsibilities at home because they could count on me. If they said something had to be done, they knew it would be done if they asked me. So that created a bad habit too of them not asking the brothers. But anyway, going back to like me growing up, I wanted so badly to be a young mom. And of course, I had seen my own mom. She had her first child when she was 19. She had three kids by the age of 23. So when I was 23 and or actually 22, and I hadn't found my Mr. Perfect, I was like devastated. So I did end up finding my Mr. Right at that age, and we got married. And by the age of 25, I had my firstborn. Actually, he was born a few weeks before I turned 25. And that's very important to me. But so I remember the feeling of raising him and like was being so excited and like almost counting down the days of when we could start feeding him normal food. I only was breastfeeding him, and that's the only food he got. We never messed with the formulas or anything because I had read enough to know that if a child is starting to get used to bottles, sometimes they will not take the nipple anymore. So I was only breastfeeding him. But I had seen my mom raise my brothers and siblings, and I've seen the baby porch, I've seen the baby food. And so we started that journey. I started with making the porridge for my child, and I remember the first time he was like so adorable, by the way. Oh, those memories. But I was taking a spoon, and put it in his mouth and just a little bit on the tip because I know that usually the first time they're getting food, they're not very happy with it. And of course, he made so many funny faces by getting this first taste in his mouth from only being breastfed until having this porridge in his mouth. And he tried to spit it out big time. And I remember the whole first feeding session was me trying to put it in his mouth, he spitting it out, and me trying to put it in his mouth, and he spitting it out. And eventually he got so frustrated at me that he was like screaming at me, which should have been a very clear sign that, okay, his stomach may not be ready for food. Yeah, anyway, we'll go back to that later. But as a newly mom, it's my first child. I try to do everything according to the book. So when it says start feeding the baby, I start feeding the baby. And eventually I started mushing some bananas and started feeding him that. But I also knew that if you start with fruit, it can be hard for them to start with, like, eat veggies. I actually tried to delay the fruit as long as possible. And I wanted him to get used to veggies. I started with like potatoes that I mashed, but it tasted like so bland. So I like added some dill and the recommendations are avoid salt, avoid flavors. You can do a little bit of herbs. So I did a little bit of herbs, but he did not like it. And I was like cooking food for him. And I had some of those freezer containers that I used to make ice with water. But instead, I would put in the baby food so that I would freeze them into small bites. And then I would package them individually. So it would be easy for me to just bring a piece of potato or sweet potato or carrot mash or whatever mash I had made out. And I would like warm that up and then feed my baby. But my baby, he was not happy. He was spitting everything out. And with this, it's also important to know that my son, he was extraordinary from he when he came out. Like he was so strong. He flipped from his back to his stomach when he was only 21 days old. He was able to like, I have pictures. I have proof. Don't think I'm exaggerating now. I have proof of him standing up and holding one of my fingers, and he's putting one foot in front of the other one, walking when he was 7 weeks and 4 days old. And those pictures are out on Facebook if someone wants to. But he was just super strong. But one of the reasons why he was so strong was because he had colic. So he was using his body, screaming every day. And he was screaming from like 1, 2 p.m. until like 11, 12 in the night. And he was so miserable, poor little guy. And I tried everything. And in hindsight, I think it is because I know it is because my own health was so poor. I needed antibiotics while I was pregnant with him. And that set me off to have a very low immune system. And me wiping out all of my good gut bacteria, that also makes him inherit my bad gut bacteria. So it's a lot of different combinations, and it's a lot of things I would have done differently today if I would only have had the knowledge about everything. So he was colicking. His stomach health was not very good. And maybe that is one of the reasons why he kept on spitting out the food. His stomach system was not ready for the food. And me being the mom that loves him so much and want him to eat, I like keep on pushing things into his mouth and he just keeps on spitting it out. I The idea of BLV is different. BLV is a way of like empowering your child to explore textures, taste, and self-regulation. So I did BLV with my second and with my third child. What I did with them was I would let them nurse for as long as they wanted to. And I wouldn't start feeding them until they basically grabbed the food off my plate. So when they were old enough to sit up, they would stretch after my food. I would have them taste. And I would not sit and mash things for them. If they wanted to taste a boiled carrot stick, they would sit there and like kind of chew on that, or a unboiled carrot stick. But whatever they try to grab, I just allow them to grab it, taste, play. And it was more play than tasting, but they would like licking and bite, trying to bite, even though they did not have any teeth. But they were in charge of what they wanted to try, when they wanted to try it. And we know for a lot of kids, the digestive system isn't fully developed when they're born. That takes time. They inherit some good gut bacteria from their mom. And as they are nursing, that is helping to build a good level of healthy gut bacteria in their stomach. But they need to build up the diversity of microbiome slowly. And it takes time for their system to be fully ready for it. So in the BLV community, they usually talk about food before one is just for fun because of their digestive system. When we're looking at animals, the animals that start eating regular food right away, they're born with teeth. But babies are not born with teeth. They are not ready to start eating food right away. And the teeth are usually coming out and being developed around the time where the microbiome and their gut health starts to be ready to intake food. And some kids have their teeth early, some kids have their teeth very late. And it's fascinating with having this knowledge of BLV that usually you can see that, yeah, it's true. Like it makes a lot of sense. So with my second and third child, I allow them to just grab whatever they wanted and just try it. And in the beginning, it was a little bit scary because you're taught that, okay, you have to mash everything so the kids doesn't put it in their throat and it becomes a choking hazard. But when I was reading up on BLV and was checking out, what does parent do? Like, what if my kid want to eat a banana and he break off too big of a piece and he like swallows it and it goes wrong and he chokes on it? What I learned was that the reason why there are so many people choking on food items is because we have been mashing it. We have been mashing it so that the kid doesn't have to chew and swallow it. And because kids have a reflex of spitting things out. So if things comes too far on our tongue, we want to make it exit the way it came out. But when we're just giving the babies mushed stuff, they don't have to do that. And they get so used to get something in your mouth, swallow it. Get something into your mouth, swallow it. And they don't get used to feel the food inside of the mouth. And we're also numbing the responses then of like getting it back out again. So it's fascinating because my second and my third child, I never mashed anything in particular with them. They were getting pieces right away. They never put anything in their throat. They never had an accident of like needing to cough things. I mean, that was dangerous. If they got too big of a piece in their mouth, they would just spit it out. And it was never an issue of like it coming too far behind and that we needed to help them in any way. So they were able to regulate it very well, and I was so impressed. My first child, however, we did have a few cases where we got a little bit worried that we had to like lay him down on his stomach on top of our legs and like pat on him a little bit to help him get stuff up. Not that it was any dangerous situation with him either. I have been around kids and I have been needed to help a baby survive that was choking. So I've seen when it's like a bad case. But it's fascinating, like looking at how the kids are developing their ability to handle it themselves if we allow them. So if we're setting them up for success. But we can also like by being the parent that is like so afraid of having a kid that's choking on anything and we're mushing everything, we're actually giving them a disadvantage in life when we're looking at the ability to handle the food they're eating. They're so used to just get food into their mouth and swallow it. And if it's too big of a piece, they might be swallow it wrong and we can have a dangerous situation in our hands. And some people are like afraid of the mess the kids are creating when they're eating like this. But to be honest, I felt like my first child was the messier kid because we would put a bowl in front of him with mashed things and he would just throw it away. He did not accept being fed. He wanted to eat by himself. And he was actually my messiest kid. And I actually started feeding him on the floor already because the plate wouldn't be thrown as far. If he just flipped it over, it was less of a mess than if he would throw it far from his high chair. And my second and my third child, yeah, I mean, all kids, they throw food every now and then, but it's a part of the package to see them try the boundaries and experience the food. But what I could see though is that my second and my third child, they have a love for food. They can sit by the dinner table, they can eat slowly, they can experience every texture and they like love it. But my first child, I saw early on that he struggled with food time. He did not want to sit still. He was always running around. He did not enjoy food. It almost felt like a chore to him to eat. And often my husband and I ate ourselves and I would like put food on his plate, but he would just like come and run and go. He wouldn't really want to sit down with us. And often I needed to use reverse psychology because I knew that if I put out a plate for him and put food on it, he would not eat. He would not touch it. it almost was like he was disgusted by food. But if I was only making a plate for me and my husband, and I would tell my little son that you cannot have mommy's food with a playful voice, and then I would look away, then he would steal food from me and he would eat. But we always had to make it a game for him to eat his food. And that kept on going on, probably for like at least a good 6 months, where we were just like playing the whole feeding time, because otherwise he would not sit down to eat food. He was just lacking the interest of it. He did not find it enjoyable. And in my heart, like from understanding BLV and seeing how my other kids was thriving with that way of thinking around food, I almost feel like the reason why he had a messed up relationship with food was because I had been the person that had been trying to decide what he needed to eat, and I've been keep on pushing it into his mouth, so he needed to spit it out over and over again when his systems were not ready for food. So I regret that with him. And even up to today, he is a very fast eater. Like he loves cooking, he loves exploring things in the kitchen, but still sometimes like he eats so fast. The eating part is still a chore. I've had him around a lot when I've been cooking. He's a very, very, very good cook. He probably cooks better than, I don't know, 60% of the population in the world. The No, but he was like flambeing bananas at the age of like 10. So he's a really skilled chef in the kitchen today. And I'm so happy that he had that interest. But I do believe that how we are introducing food into our kids' life does affect them for many, many, many years. Something I did see with my firstborn, though, was that he never liked the food that came in a baby jar. And luckily for him, I did not like the idea of processed foods even then. So I only bought baby jars a handful of times. Like it was not a staple. We just had it for emergency. I would basically make all the baby food from scratch. I would do all the baby smoothies, and I would do, yeah, I basically did everything from scratch. I'm so happy for that today. And of course, I kept on doing like my other two kids, they were only eating the food we were eating. So, but I'm happy and thankful for that today, because reading into what's actually in the baby food is pretty scaring. And why it's so scary is that it's not like a parent can just smell and taste the food before the kid is starting to eat to see if it's safe or not. Because the heavy metals, you can't see them, you can't smell it, you can't taste it. But there are heavy metals like lead and arsenic found in the baby food. There was a 2019 study that was called What's in My Baby's Food? And they were testing a bunch of different brands and a bunch of different jars. And they found 95% of all the baby food jars that was tested, they contained lead. And even trace amounts of lead can be harmful. There are no safe levels of lead for children. So I'm going to quote Jane Holihan. She said, nearly all baby food contains heavy metals, so babies are being exposed with every meal. And this is scary, but I'm not here to scare. I'm here to empower you with the knowledge, because knowledge is power. And if we can just make a choice that we try to feed our kids a little bit more whole foods that we are making at our house, it can make a big difference. So, what can parents do? Well, choose whole foods when possible. In homemade baby food, you can at least control the ingredients. Can we be sure that our fruit and veggies don't have heavy metals as well? Not really. But if we're choosing local farmers, if we're choosing to buy organic, at least we are on the right path. And maybe you have something growing in your garden. Maybe you have an apple tree or a pear tree or plums or something that you can use. But just because something is organic doesn't mean that it doesn't contain any heavy metals. It depends on what's in the ground, where there are in the soil, where they are growing the fruit and veggies as well. But if we're rotating what we're feeding the kids, for example, if you're only feeding your kid bananas, mashed bananas, or you're sitting and scraping, and that's the only thing your baby will have for breakfast, lunch, and dinner every single day, if that banana contains lead, your baby's going to end up with lead poisoning. But if you're rotating it and maybe it's a banana for one meal and maybe it's a carrot the other meal and maybe it's a sweet potato the other meal and we're rotating it, we're more or less likely to have the same amount of problem in every single food group. That is then reducing the risk of having an exposure that is very high, that is harmful for heavy metals. And some low risk options for heavy metals are avocados, bananas, sweet potatoes, and yogurt that is unsweetened. Okay, just plain yogurt. And what I like to do with the yogurt, for example, is that I'm mashing a banana and putting that in the yogurt. And to make it a little bit more flavorful, or some frozen raspberries, I just mix things into the yogurt to make it more pleasant to eat if the kid is struggling with just plain. But to be honest, if we're starting out feeding kids plain things, they will love plain things. It's when we start to feed them with flavorful things that they will struggle with plain things. So what can we do? Well, start reading labels and stay informed. And this is true for both kids and adults, is that if we can eat things that have less labels, which means like an apple doesn't have a label, just ground meat usually don't have a label more than it says meat. So if we try to eat things that have as few ingredients as possible and preferably not having a label, that will help us a lot. If you are a parent and want community, there are so many good Facebook groups out there. There's so many Facebook groups on BLW. That's where I was hanging out when I was a young mom. And if you're looking into something else, check out Facebook group for EC too. EC have more to do with helping, empowering the child to learn how to pee and poop outside of the diaper, which is much more pleasant. So you basically potty train them. And I did that with my kids too, and it was amazing. But there are a lot of communities out there with parents, and they're sharing their expertise in what the research have been showing that they have researched. So I would encourage you to find a supportive group of parents that you can join to, yeah, just have a little bit more fun on the journey and also feel supported. And I would encourage you all to support initiatives that are pushing for stricter regulations in baby food production. And I'm so happy right now that United States are starting to get their eyes open for what's actually put into like Kellogg's products and cereal and so on. And that they have actually banned Kellogg's for being allowed to have any product in schools. I love it. I love it. I love it because there are so many additives and coloring agents that are not supposed to be in a child's body. So I am so happy for the trend we're moving into now, where people are actually questioning and they're starting to become stronger advocates for our children and for our health. So yes, go out, and if you see something, support it, share it, okay? And I know it is not easy to be a parent. I know it's already hard enough to be a parent, and we're all doing our best. And the goal is not to be perfect, but just to be able to make informed decisions. And feeding your child is a journey, whether you go BLV or if you mash everything up, if you're using a mixer, like the nutrition we're able to get into the babies are the most important. And you do whatever fits your life. I'm just sharing my experience with BLV, but I hope that we can inspire just parents to do a little bit more homemade food. It's not very hard as you're cooking food for your family to take out some of the food before you put on seasoning because babies should not have a lot of seasoning. So you can take some food out before you put on seasoning. That's what I did. So it did not take me any longer time to make baby food versus our food. And as the baby is getting older and can handle more spices, they were just eating whatever we were eating. And have some fun with making the food. And there are so many recipes too. If you just search on baby food smoothie or baby food and whatever, and you can just find what you should look for and what you should aim for. And it can be a lot of fun to be on this journey as well, even if it can be also stressful. But let's be honest, life with small kids, it is stressful. There are so many worries, there are so many things to think of, and it's so much to learn. But at the same time, it's so rewarding to see your child grow up to crazy fun human beings that are smart and are teaching us things every day. If you have any experience with feeding your child, I would love if you could pop on over to my Instagram. I'm just Michaela Morel on my Instagram. And under the episode, comment if you have had a special feeding experience. It can be a fun story, it can be a scary story, it can be your experience with BLW versus feeding traditional, or yeah, whatever you want to share. I would be happy to hear about it. Well, thank you guys for being here with me today, and I'll see you next week. Bye. Hey guys, if you enjoyed today's episode, I encourage you to do one thing for me. Think of one person you want to share this podcast with and copy the link and send it right away. Thanks for playing an important role in the Blue Zone community. And if you want to keep on building a better you, one essential building block at a time, hit that subscribe button. See you in the next episode.